Here, with a temperature of 71 degrees Celsius, we've got the hottest place on Earth, the Lut Desert in Iran. The Lut Desert isn't massive. It covers an area of 51,800 square kilometers and ranks as the 33rd largest desert in the world. First, let's talk about the name. Where does Lut come from, and what does it mean? Lut is a Persian word that means bare, thirsty, or barren. Some people also call it the Lut Basin, but technically, the correct name is the Lut Desert. This desert is a UNESCO World Heritage Site, and it's actually the first natural site from Iran to be registered there. Most people think the Lut Desert has always been just, well, a desert, but that's not the case. One of the world's oldest civilizations was actually located right next to it, the civilization of the Burnt City, or in Persian, Shar-e-Sukhteh. This ancient city was established around 5,500 years ago, during the Bronze Age. If you check out the Burnt City's Wikipedia page, it says this civilization dates back to prehistoric Iran. It existed around the same time as the Mesopotamian civilizations, like the Sumerians, but they weren't the same. Archaeological finds in the Burnt City show how advanced this civilization was. For example, the world's first animation was made here. They found a clay goblet with a series of drawings on it that, when spun, create an animated sequence. When archaeologists studied this goblet, they figured out it was from around 3,178 BCE, so roughly 5,200 years ago. This goblet is now kept in the National Museum of Iran. In one of the graves in the Burnt City, they discovered a skeleton of a woman with a prosthetic eye. Apparently, her original eye was damaged, so they made her a fake one, probably for aesthetic reasons. The prosthetic was made of tar, but was designed to look like a real eye. This woman must have been super important, because not only did she have this prosthetic, but it was also decorated with gold. And here's another crazy detail. She was 182 centimeters tall. That's around 6 feet, which was insanely tall for people back then, especially for a woman. Oh, and the world's first backgammon board was also found in the Burnt City. Well, it doesn't exactly look like today's backgammon boards, but it had dice and game pieces. Some historians believe this was the first backgammon ever, while others think it might have been the first board game of any kind. Despite all these discoveries and everything we've learned about the Burnt City, archaeologists say we've barely scratched the surface. They admit we still don't fully understand this civilization. We don't know much about the people, what language they spoke, what religion they followed, or what their culture was like. And the biggest mystery, why this civilization disappeared. All right. So we've learned a little bit about the Burnt City. Now, let's head back to the Lut Desert to see what else is going on there. As we mentioned earlier, the Lut Desert holds the record for the hottest place on Earth. Back in 2003, NASA's Aqua satellite, which was studying the planet's climate, discovered that the Lut Desert was the hottest spot on the planet. They recorded a scorching 70.7 degrees there. NASA announced that this is the hottest area in the world. Some people argue that Death Valley in California is actually the hottest, but that's not true. The highest temperature ever recorded in Death Valley was 56.7 degrees back in 1913, and it hasn't come close to that record since. So, why is the Lut Desert so hot? The first reason is something called a rain shadow. In the video we did about the Himalayas, we explained rain shadows and their effects. But if you missed that one, a rain shadow is when surrounding mountains block rain clouds from reaching a certain area. The mountains around the Lut Desert don't let a single cloud pass through, which is why it's so bone dry here. Another reason for the extreme heat is the dark color of the sand and rocks. The surface of the desert is mostly covered with volcanic rocks, which are darker in color. Darker surfaces absorb more heat, making the ground here even hotter than other deserts, like the ones in North Africa, the Arabian Peninsula, or even Death Valley in California. And then there are those mountains we mentioned earlier. They not only block the rain, but also trap heat in the desert. They kind of act like a barrier, keeping the heat from escaping. On top of that, if you look at the geography of the Iranian plateau, you'll notice that the Lut Desert sits like a basin, lower than the areas around it. When a hot area is also shaped like a bowl, it just keeps getting hotter and hotter because the heat gets trapped and can't escape. The Lut Desert is home to some of the most incredible desert formations in the world, including the largest mud brick city. The Kalut formations in Lut look like the ruins of an enormous city from a distance, which is why they're often called a fantasy city. From afar, it really does look like a city, but when you get closer, you realize it's all natural formations. So yeah, the desert is like this now, but it wasn't always this way. It used to be home to civilizations and has broken quite a few records. For instance, the tallest sand dunes in the world are here, with the highest one reaching 480 meters. 40 ancient volcanic cones can be found in the Lut Desert. The largest nebkas in the world are also here. Nebkas are plants that survive in this extreme heat and are considered natural wonders. What do you think about all this?